Recording in 3, 2, and 1.
So this series essentially answers the question, what do they do in Star Trek when they're just kind of fucking off?
Welcome to episode 158 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 158. I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Jeffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows, the ups and downs, the good and the bad, the nerd and the murd. Um, I had a situation. It wasn't funny at the time. I guess it's a little funny looking now, but I'm always talking about the golf course. One of the things that I'm kind of obsessed with are found balls,
Uh-huh.
because those are free.
Uh-huh.
And by hole number 5, yeah, by hole number 5, we've got a little pond right next to the tee box, and it's so dry down here right now. It's just dried up, and
Uh-huh.
was there yesterday, and I saw three balls out there, kind of in the middle of it, and two of them are red, which Chelsea really likes the red. And I've got a ball retriever. It's pretty long, but I had to go out a little bit, and because like I said, I wanted to get them. They're free. Um. So anyway, I start to walk on this very crusty ground, and
Mm-hmm.
just taking my steps a little bit at a time. And I was just about over to the fallest one when I suddenly sunk in up to my knees. Um, and not only that, I couldn't get out.
Yeah.
It was like quicksand.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes, that's what quicksand is.
yes, that's exact. And I mean, I was in a panic mode. I couldn't pull my feet out. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna be stuck here, and this is so embarrassing. I'm so stupid. Why am I out here doing this? I finally got out, and I'm just caked with mud from the
Mhm.
knees down, and it was just completely ridiculous. The stupidest thing I could have done. I don't know why the hell I was out there.
Did you get the balls?
I got two of them. The
Nice.
farthest one I couldn't get, um,
Nice.
because that's where I fell in. Just like the walking across an ice pond, and suddenly, that looks thick, and you
Spooky.
suddenly fall in. It was so stupid. So stupid. Why the fuck was I out there?
Hey man, I did it a lot when I was a kid, so I get it.
Yeah. So that ended my day.
Yeah.
I had to go to the cart barn and hose myself down.
Nice.
And it's so hot out here. I turned on that hose, and it was nothing but steaming hot water coming out of the
Oh my
hose.
God. Yeah, let it run for a minute, man.
God, so stupid. What the hell was I doing? So anyway, yeah, that was yesterday.
Nice.
So lots of fun. Lots of fun. Stupidity at its best. All right. So I know what we're talking about today. I'll let you take over on the nerdery side of the house.
Excellent. Today we're talking about Star Trek Lower Decks. Does it still sound
Uh,
like I'm saying something X?
no, lower
Wait,
decks, I understand.
Lower
Which
Decks.
which I haven't seen the show. Strangely enough, I played a video game based around lower decks. It's one of those, what do they call them? Idle games, where you
Okay.
you just set the characters to do things, and when you're offline, they continue to generate stuff.
Okay.
And it was funny. It had little cut scenes in between everything, and so I kind of got to know the characters a little bit, and it was pretty funny, pretty funny. But I haven't actually seen the show.
Oh, you should sit down and watch the show. The show's pretty awesome. It's incredible. Well, okay, it's funny. It's one of those ones you can just kind of watch and you just start laughing because it's all
Right,
Star Trek jokes. It's all Star Trek jokes all the time. There's a story going on, but generally the people involved are only involved in the story tangentially.
right. And I mean, this is about a group of lower ranking
Mhm.
Starfleet personnel that do the
On
menial jobs
Yeah,
around the ship.
on a lower ranking ship, no less.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
uh, how did they put it? Oh, let me see. I've got some pretty succinct notes on this. Um where is it about the Cerritos? So the main setting of the series is the starship USS Cerritos, a California class ship. This ship class created for lower decks is a class of support ship starships that work with larger starships like those seen in previously in the franchise, but are not important enough to have appearances on screen. McMahon described the mission of the Cerritos as second contact. After Starfleet has made first contact with a new alien civilization and invited it to join the Federation, the crew of support ships like the Cerritos arrive to find all the good places to eat and set up the communications stuff, which is a pretty succinct explanation of what they do.
Hmm.
Um, oh my God, it's so funny. Funniest scene, and they had a crossover with Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, I knew about that.
With a time portal. So you get Boimler and oh my God, Tawny Newsome. I can't think of the character's name. The actress Tawny Newsome.
Hmm.
Um, they go over there, and there's a saddle on a saddle horse, um, in the captain's area, and Jack Quaid just walks up, swings his leg over, and doesn't say, "I'm gonna Riker." He just says, "Riker," and gets up on the saddle by kicking his leg up over it. You know, like Riker sits in
Hmm.
chairs. Yeah. He just goes, "Riker." Oh my God, it's so funny. Um, Lower Decks is an American adult animation science fiction television series created by Mike McMahon for the streaming service CBS All Access, later rebranded as Paramount Plus. It is the ninth Star Trek series and debuted in 2020 as part of an executive producer Alex Kurtzman's expanded Star Trek universe. The franchise's first animation series since Star Trek the Animated Series concluded in 1974, and also its first comedy. Lower Decks follows the low-ranking support crew of the starship Cerritos in the 24th century. Tawny Newsome, Jack Quaid, Noel Wells, and Eugene Cordero voiced junior Lower Decks crew members of the Cerritos, with Don Lewis, Jerry O'Connell, Fred Tatasciore, and Gillian Vigman providing voices of the ship's senior officers. Work on the animated Star Trek series began in June 2018. McMahon joins as creator and showrunner by that October, with Lower Decks was ordered 2 more seasons by All Access. The series is produced by CBS Eye Animation Productions in association with Secret Hideout, Important Science, and Roddenberry Entertainment, and animation studio Titmouse. They later began work by February of 2019, and the main cast was announced that July. Production on the first 2 seasons shifted to taking place remotely in March of 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The series features many connections and references to past Star Trek series. It premiered on CBS All Access on August 6, 2020, with its 10-episode first season. Was released roughly throughout October of 2020. The second season was released on Paramount Plus from August to October of 2021, and a third season was released from August to October of 2022. A fourth season was released from September to November of 2023, and a fifth season is in development. The series has received positive reviews and several accolades, including a Primetime Creative Arts Emmy Award and nominating for sound editing. Even though it's funny, and it's, again, it's telling the story of Starfleet from the perspective of not people dealing with major issues every day, people who
Hmm.
deal with everyday issues. It is very, very well done. It's well acted or well voiced.
Voice, yeah.
um yeah, the animation is really tight. um the music's good, and they bring people in all the time. A lot of Star Trek alums will come in and play characters similar to the characters they played in the series before, or just random things, and you know who it is when they start to talk. Um, it's really, really good. It's really, really funny, and if you know Star Trek, it's a must. It's one of those things. It's like, I mean, if you're a Star Trek nerd, this show was made for you. So, what did you think about the game? Talk to me about the game.
It was fun. Like I said, it was what they call an idle game where you set the characters about doing tasks, and when you're offline, they'll continue doing those tasks and generating uh, credits for you or um, uh, dilithium, I think it is. It was fun. I mean, it got tedious after a while, and I ended up stopped playing the game. But in between, you've got a series of missions that you have to complete, or a series of tasks that you have to complete, and it gets progressively harder and harder and harder. And it's one of those games you get to a point that if you don't pay any money for the game, you start to get to a point where you really can't progress any further.
Oh,
And I hate those games, and that's a lot of games out there that they're pay to play. They
mhm.
have things that you can purchase, and if you do that, it will help you go. But you cannot pay, and you get to a certain point, and then you really can't
You just kind
play
of flounder.
anymore. Yeah, you
Yeah.
just flounder. You can't play anymore without paying. Um, but anyway, like I said, you would complete all these various tasks, um, and then when you completed the series of tasks for that level, then there would be a cutscene with a story that was going along with what you were doing, and it was funny. There was some good stuff in there. Um, I'm sure you'd recognize the characters, and I don't have the game on my phone right now, or I'd pull it up. But I mean, there's a dog you get
Hmm.
at some point, which will help complete tasks, and there's the different crew members, and the captain shows up, and you can have the captain do stuff, and the security officer, and the scientist, who I think is an alien, if I remember right. Um, so I think fans of the show would probably enjoy the game for the different cut levels. Um, but like I said, it's pay to play, and I got to a point where I couldn't progress any further, so I deleted the game.
Um, that sounds like fun. Actually, that sounds really in keeping with this show because there are several episodes where it's like, okay, we've got to do this. Well, there's a way where we can automate doing this to make it easier so we can go drink some more.
And that's what you do in the game. You get to a point where you're automating the task, because when you first start out, you have to click a button to start the task, and after the time goes by to complete the task, then you have to click it again to gather the resources and then continue on. But you get to a certain point where the tasks are automated, and they automatically give you the revenue for what tasks you created. So you've got to get various things, various items, so that you can set the automation into motion.
Nice.
Yeah, look
Nice.
up the Lower Decks app. Like I said, you can play it for a while for free.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. I may have to
Several
check that out.
levels.
So Star Trek Lower Decks is set in the late 24th century of the Star Trek universe, where Earth is part of the multi-species United Federation of Planets. The Federation's military and exploration divisions, Starfleet, operates a fleet of ships that travel the galaxy, establishing contact with alien races. Lower Decks focuses on one of Starfleet's least important ships, the USS Cerritos. And unlike previous Star Trek series, whose principal characters are typically starship captains and other senior officers, Lower Decks focuses on the mission and adventures of the lower deckers, lower ranking officers with menial jobs, while the captain and other senior staff appear as supporting characters. It is set in 2380, 1 year after the film Star Trek Nemesis. And unlike typical Star Trek series, it focuses on that support crew. Uh, McMahon set the series shortly after Nemesis, the last Star Trek film in the Next Generation era, due to his love for the Next Generation. The series is named after the Next Generation episode Lower Decks, which also focuses on the lives of lower ranking Starship personnel, and which McMahon said was his favorite episode of any Star Trek series. The episode was the first thing McMahon showed the Lower Decks writers' room when they started work on the series. McMahon was inspired by the social side stories in the episode of The Next Generation, with Kurtzman explaining that a story of a typical Star Trek episode would be taking place in the background of each Lower Decks episode. So huge, crazy shit is going on in the background, and that's super peripheral to the story that you're actually focusing on. Kurtzman felt this made the series a unique addition to the franchise, stating in late 2019, astrophysicist Eric McDonald joined the Star Trek franchise as a science advisor. McDonald said each series was on a spectrum of science fiction, and the Lower Decks writers approached science fiction from the perspective of we can get away with a lot more than the live action series. So her role was mostly to fix small dialogue mistakes to ensure correct terms were being used. I talked about the Cerritos and what a California class starship is. McMahon wanted the California class ship to be named after a Californian cities, and he chose the city of Cerritos because he otherwise only knew it from local Cerritos Auto Square car dealership ads. He wanted to give the city one more thing other than just being the home of the Cerritos Auto Square, which I think is hysterical. But McMahon did not want the humor to be punching down on Trek and focusing on telling Star Trek stories where the characters just happened to be funny. Writers from different comedic backgrounds and with different levels of Star Trek interest were hired. Kurtzman described Lower Decks as a love letter to Star Trek. I would agree. I would agree wholeheartedly with that assessment that it is a love letter to Star Trek. If you're a Star Trek fan, especially the Next Generation series, and there was 3 or 4 of them. Check this out. Dig it. Oh, wait. No, there were only 3 because you had Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager all happening in the same universe, roughly the same time. This is in that same universe. It's, at the same time.
Not universe, but same time frame.
Yeah, same timeline in that period.
Right.
So, I mean, and again, it focuses on these guys just doing stuff in the Federation. Mariner, Tawny Newsom's character, was actually higher ranked originally, and she got busted down to being a lower decker, and they never could figure out why, because she just goes off and does some crazy stuff. It's because when she was higher ranked and like a lieutenant, she watched a lot of people die on those big hardcore ships like the Titan. Boimler gets assigned to the Titan and he gets cloned, and he ends up getting sent back to the Cerritos. But yeah, it's pretty hardcore. And it's like, you don't want to do that. You want to come do this. This is where the Federation is awesomest. And you find out that Mariner's mother is actually the captain. So there's that dynamic going on, but Mariner doesn't want to talk about it. And Boimler, he's fresh out of the academy. He wants to be on the Titan. He wants to be, in the thick of it. He's looking at Picard, and he's a student of Federation history and all this stuff. He's a fanboy, basically. Tendi, who is an Orion, is studying medicine, and she wants to be thought of as smart, and she's tired of Orions as always being perceived as pirates. And it kind of drives her nuts that that's not the case. That she's putting forth that she is every bit as competent and qualified. She's not going to steal anything or anything else. You come to find out, Tendi's entire family is all pirates.
Well, most Orions are.
Yeah, when they go back to Orion. But her thing is like, that's not what I'm about. Yeah, she has like this amazing fucking pirate name, like Queen of Shattered Stars or something like that. That's how she addresses herself when she goes to Orion, and she's so embarrassed by it. Oh my God! And the last character, he's had an accident doing some hinky shit with some test piloting. So he's got a piece on his head with a visor or a partial visor.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Played wonderfully by Eugene Cordero, who was also in he's been in several series. Um, Tacoma FD for one. The reason he left Tacoma FD was he wanted to focus more on this and another series he was doing. But he's so great at that. He's real mild mannered, really kind, loving. Turns out that's not actually who that guy is. The guy he was before the accident was a complete and total prick, but he likes himself better now. He's also a really gifted engineer. And he tries out some other things on the ship to make sure its engineering is what he wants to do. And he does. He likes to spend time in the Jeffries tubes. It makes him happy. But it's them, and then you've got the captain, you've got the head of security, um, uh, the XO, played wonderfully by Jerry O'Connell, is basically a Riker clone. You have Riker and oh my God, Mrs. Riker,
Oh,
Marina Sirtis.
Yeah, Maria Sir,
Okay, so I don't feel bad.
Deanna Troy.
And Deanna Troy are in it for a few episodes as the Rikers on the Titan. Um, it's pretty funny. There's a lot of really cool stuff. They go back to the Lazarus planet um, from the original series, or Landru. It turns out that was the first contact with those people when they basically stopped the computer from working and made them stop living this weird life. When the Cerritos gets back like 120 years later, they've turned the computer back on. They're like, you guys got to quit doing this. Total side story. That's not actually what's going on in the story itself. That's just the setup for it. But it's so funny. And again, it's one of those things. If you're into Star Trek, this show is for you. And it's not making they don't make fun of Star Trek. Um, they make fun of they make fun of just stuff going wrong. Um, and the people are funny, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not like Red Dwarf, which Red Dwarf kind of makes fun of Star Trek. You know, that's kind of part of their shtick. You know, Lister does it all the time with oh what is this Earth thing you do that's called kissing? I don't want to run into a woman like that. That kind of thing. They don't do any of that. It's all straight down the pike. I mean, there's serious stuff. They get their jobs done. They do what needs to be done, but they also like to fuck off. Eat good food, drink good drinks. Um, they do have to sleep on a bunk corridor, which becomes a point of contention at one point. It's basically a corridor with bunks on the sides of it because they're
Mm-hmm.
lower deckers. Um, and it's like, I want a room. At one point they all get a room, and then they all decide they all want to go back to the bunk area because they miss being around each other. But yeah, that's about it for Lower Decks, other than get out and watch it. I can't recommend one episode over the other. Just watch them. Just
How many seasons are there?
four now. They're about to be five.
Okay.
But I think they're only like 10 episodes, maybe 40 episodes altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
A half hour or hour
yeah,
long?
half hour.
Half hour.
Yeah, half hour. And 5 minutes of it's the opening, which is really cool and really kind of beautiful. It's well drawn. It's a classic Star Trek opening.
No, go check out the game too if you just want something that
Yeah,
idle time.
idle time. Right
Yeah,
on.
but look up Star Trek Lower Decks. You'll find it. It'll be out there pretty quick
Right on.
if you look for it. Awesome. Well, thank you for another journey on yet another Star Trek series. Appreciate that. With that, I'll take over on the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off Medium, Wikipedia, the website for Frank F. Weber, who's a true crime author, and the Glade Water Mirror. And this is the story of Gerald the Animal McFadden.
Gerald the Animal McFadden.
So Gerald Jerry Walter McFadden, who was also known as the Animal, was an American serial killer and sex offender who was convicted of the May 1986 murders of two women and one man in Smith County, Texas. He fled from jail shortly after his arrest, leading to the biggest manhunt in Texas history, with it coming to an end in July of that year.
Funny, I don't
Uh,
remember this at all.
mhm. On the afternoon of Sunday, May 4th, 1986, 18-year-old graduating senior Suzanne Harrison and her best friend Gina Lee Turner, who was 20, decided to spend a day at Lake Hawkins, a favorite hangout for the young and young at heart in the tight-knit Texas community of Hawkins, which Hawkins, Stranger Things.
Hmm.
There will be another tie to that here in a little while, or towards the end, actually. Local teenagers like to gravitate to the small beach called the Point, and parents felt safe letting them go there. In keeping with their usual routine, they planned to meet up with 19-year-old Brian Boone, who resided with his uncle, just a short trip from the lake. The happy-go-lucky trio, who had always been thick as thieves, had every intention of enjoying a leisurely afternoon basking in the sun, stopping periodically to cool off in the pristine water. What they didn't know as they grabbed their gear and headed towards the shore was that their lives, so full of promise and hope for the future, were about to end in a flurry of violence that none of them had seen coming.
Hmm.
So at some point during their lazy day, there was a stranger who came upon the group of friends, all of whom described by those who knew him as the cream of the crop. Since the person responsible for the carnage that had ensued as a result of that fateful encounter chose to keep the details of his depravity to himself, it was up to police investigators to piece together the tragic events that unfolded in the slice of heaven by the lake. From what authorities could gather, an armed man had approached the group as they lay on the beach, and with malice on his mind and darkness in his heart, he had marched Brian and Gina into a secluded area where he shot them both execution style in the back of the head. And aware of the fact of what he had in store for Suzanne would require privacy, he drove her to Barnwell Mountain Park, which was a recreational area located some 30 miles away in Upshur County. Once there, he beat her, raped her, and sodomized her before strangling her to death with her own underwear. When the three failed to return home by nightfall, their families went looking for them. Excuse me.
Bless you.
And after checking the places their loved ones were known to frequent and finding no trace of them, they'd taken their concern to the police. Monday morning, Brian's truck was discovered by the lake with the women's purses still in the vehicle. The day after the disappearances were first reported, a member of the maintenance crew at Barnwell Mountain Park stumbled upon Suzanne's nude body laying discarded in the brush. Not far from her broken form lay a pair of shorts and torn undergarments, which were later identified as belonging to the still unaccounted for Gina Turner. A medical examiner determined that the teenager had sustained multiple blows to the face and body during a prolonged and exceedingly sadistic assault. The underwear that had been used to end her life were still tied tightly around her neck, and the cause of death was ruled homicide. Although the area where the body was discovered had been cordoned off and searched with a fine-tooth comb, there were still no signs of Suzanne's companions, who were now listed as missing and endangered. 5 days after the discovery in Barnwell Mountain Park, Brian and Gina's badly decomposed remains were found in a canal just outside of Ore City, which was over 40 miles from Lake Hawkins, where the ordeal began. Autopsies would soon reveal that the victims, who were positively identified through dental records, had died from gunshot wounds. If they had endured other injuries in the moments leading up to the shots being fired, there was no way of knowing the extent. And since the scorching Texas sun had hastened the process of decomposition, forensics experts had been left with very little to work with. Witnesses who had been in the area the day of the murders came forward to say that they had seen a bushy haired man covered in a number of distinctive tattoos hanging around the lake on Sunday evening. Besides the collection of satanic symbols that marked his skin, a flourish of ink across his chest had tagged him as, quote, a lonesome loser, or just a lonesome loser. One couple, Clifton and Denise Walker, recalled that they had been approached around 7:30 p.m. by an imposing figure sporting a shock of electrified hair, who had demanded that they give him all their money. When they informed him very truthfully that they didn't have a dollar between them, he had threatened to take Denise in lieu of cash. Clifton then thought fast and offered the stranger a beer, which he then readily accepted. And seemingly satisfied with this resolution, their aggressor, who was now surprisingly calm, had retreated to his blue and white Ford Bronco and fled into the night. Having interacted with the person of interest in a triple homicide more than they would have liked, the shaken pair were able to provide details to detectives that proved invaluable to the investigation, including his license plate number. On Tuesday afternoon, a patrolman spotted a Bronco fitting the description of the one driven by the individual who had been harassing people at the lake on the day that Suzanne, Brian, and Gina were killed. When he pulled the vehicle over, the unkempt man behind the wheel identified himself as Gerald McFadden. The Lonesome Loser ink displayed prominently on his chest signaled to authorities they were on the right track. And Gerald admitted to running into the couple at the lake, but claims he was just kidding about the robbery. It didn't take long for law enforcement officials to determine that McFadden was an ex-con with an alarming history of attacks on women. Wearing his notoriety like a badge of honor, now that he was in custody, he then informed everyone within earshot that they could address him by his preferred name, Animal. So this was 38-year-old McFadden, who had a reputation for being mean as a striped snake. He had a criminal history that dated back to 1966 when he was arrested for burglary at age of 18. He was a seventh grade dropout, and it was apparent that he had decided early on that a life of crime suited him just fine. In 1973, McFadden pleaded guilty to raping a 14-year-old girl the year before, and he also confessed to doing the same to a junior high school teacher just prior to his arrest. During the penalty phase of his proceedings, a judge sentenced the remorseless McFadden to 15 years behind bars. In a maddening travesty of justice that would soon become a pattern, he was back on the streets in less than 6. McFadden, who would choose right over wrong on every turn, had no more than cleared the prison doors before he reverted to his own ways. In 1979, only weeks after his release, he had kidnapped, raped, and sodomized an 18-year-old office worker at knife point. And it wasn't lost on detectives working the Lake Hawkins murders that the 1979 attack was eerily similar to the one perpetrated on Suzanne Harrison. The only difference being that the victim in the earlier incident had survived. As a punishment for his brutality, McFadden once again received the pat sentence of 15 years. And in spite of his history of violence, he was back on the streets in less than half that time. McFadden, who had shown time and time again that he was an ongoing threat, who had no intention of changing his ways, was freed in 1985 when the state of Texas implemented a sweeping early release program that allowed even the most violent criminals to leave the confines of prison in order to make room for an influx of new offenders. He was still on parole when the murders at the lake took place. As a side note, it was also during this period of purging that convicted triple murderer Kenneth McDuff, who we covered, was integrated back into society, where he wasted no time torturing, raping, and killing at least 7 women before he was captured with the help of America's
Yeah.
Most Wanted.
Well, they had to make room for all the people who were getting convicted for mandatory drug sentences.
Right. I
Yeah,
know. I
yeah. So
remember this.
yeah. So a dude selling a bag of weed does more time than a triple homicide guy.
I know. That
Still
that
don't get that.
that was crazy.
Yeah.
McFadden had been unemployed off and on as a lineman for the telephone company when he wasn't paying his numerous debts to society, and he denied having anything to do with the abductions and subsequent murders of Suzanne, Brian, and Gina. While the divorced father of 2 admitted that he often camped near Lake Hawkins, he claimed that he had no recollection of ever seeing the victims. He added that on the off chance that he had spoken with them in passing, he hadn't done them any harm. Detectives convinced that he was lying through his teeth, and with the blessing of the district attorney, charged McFadden with the kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder of Suzanne Harrison. Since semen stains found on her underwear matched samples taken from McFadden, authorities felt that hers was the case they stood the best chance of winning. But in a move that disappointed the victims' families, the state chose not to charge him with the murders of Brian and Gina, citing a lack of physical evidence. However, investigators did make it known they believed wholeheartedly in his guilt. They simply couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt in court of law. On July 9th, 1986, which was only weeks after his arrest, McFadden escaped from custody using a young deputy who was working dispatch as a human shield, and he had beaten her with a metal pipe.
Hmm.
Once they were safely outside the jailhouse walls, he forced his hostage, 24-year-old Rosalie Williams, to drive to a remote location where he felt confident they would never be found. During the escape through rural Texas, Rosalie's Datsun 280ZX overheated, forcing them to abandon the car and continue on foot.
Damn, he must have been running that 280Z hard if it
Oh yeah.
overheated.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
you really got to put the screws to those things to make them go bad, or at least back then.
Well, 28 hours into the ordeal, Rosalie managed to escape from the railroad boxcar that had become her makeshift prison, and her capture started what would be the largest manhunt in the history of Texas. There were thousands of armed Texans who had searched for the two.
They would need them. I was just looking in the map where Hawkins is because I wasn't sure. Dude, yeah, it's like out by Big Sandy. I
Yep,
mean, the thicket is out there.
yep. Well,
Yeah.
the large number of Texans on the manhunt allowed them to block all of the roads and railroad tracks in the area of Big Sandy too.
Hmm.
The following morning, McFadden was apprehended and returned to jail, where he was kept under constant surveillance while he waited his day in court. His trial got officially underway in the summer of 1987, and in a lucky break for the prosecution, the presiding judge had ruled during a pretrial hearing that they would be allowed to present evidence of the defendant's past arrests, which involved the crime of sexual nature against women. This decision was a devastating blow to the defense, who would face an uphill battle convincing a jury that the accused wasn't a predator that needed to be wiped off the face of the earth. McFadden's court appointed attorney argued that his client was an innocent man who shouldn't be judged by his past misdeeds. He maintained that the fact that Suzanne's murder matched McFadden's modus operandi was nothing more than coincidence. That he was known to haunt the area where she and her friends were last seen alive was, according to his legal team, a mere happenstance. And you know,
It's their job. That's what they're
it
doing their
is
job.
exactly, and that's what I was about to say. The defense is doing their job. That
That's right.
unfortunately, even when you've got all this evidence against you, your lawyer has to do their job,
That's right.
and it sounds slimy what they're doing, but it's not.
No, it's not. It is one of the highest callings because everybody is afforded due process. Even guys fucking did it.
Right,
And
right.
and hey, much love to them. I don't know if I could do it.
That's got to be a really hard job to be a
Oh yeah.
defense attorney.
Oh yeah.
In criminal proceedings. That's got to be a very hard job, especially
Yeah.
when you just know that your client is guilty, that you've got to do
Yeah.
everything.
The client has probably confessed to you, but you can't say anything about it. Oh yeah, I totally killed him, but you can't say nothing because you're my lawyer.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. So I don't want to put anything against the
Yeah.
defense lawyers. It just sounds really harsh the way it
Yeah.
goes, but anyway. So in keeping with this position, the defense put forth the notion that the real killers were still on the loose and could strike again at any time. To back up this claim, they pointed to the sworn statement of alleged eyewitness who said they had seen a disheveled hitchhiker covered in abrasions lurking around the lake on the day of the murders. Unfortunately for McFadden, no one else had seen this elusive red herring, and his whereabouts, if he did indeed exist, were never determined.
Or he could have just been a disheveled hitchhiker.
Yeah,
He may have abrasions because he was in the big thicket.
right. Well, the jury pondered carefully for 2.5 weeks, and they found Gerald McFadden guilty on all counts and recommended he be put to death for his crimes. Um, the jury only deliberated for 35 minutes after listening to 2.5 weeks of testimony.
They read the charges out and went, yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, 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 yeah.
During the penalty phase, McFadden's teenage daughter had taken the stand to beg for mercy on her father's behalf. She likened the death penalty to state-sanctioned murder, and she condemned the practice as barbaric. Unmoved by her impassioned pleas, though, the judge agreed with the jury, and in July of 1987, he ordered that McFadden die by lethal injection. And while this may have not been what his handful of supporters wanted to hear, the greater community breathed a collective sigh of relief. Even though observers had felt some sympathy for McFadden's daughter, they couldn't forget that Suzanne, who had only wanted to spend the day sunbathing with her friends, had been returned to her family in a body bag.
Mm-hmm.
In an interview conducted after the verdict was rendered, prosecutor Stephen Tokoloy described McFadden as a, quote, scary individual whose penchant for evil had known no bounds. He was a repeat offender whose crimes had grown progressively violent over the years, finally culminating in murder, and Tokoloy felt certain that the rabid animal would have kept on killing for as long as time allowed. On October 14th, 1999, the last of his appeals were exhausted, and McFadden was put to death in the Huntsville unit, where he'd been housed for over a decade. Suzanne's mother and brother were on hand to witness McFadden die, who had forever altered the course of their lives, and were able to watch him pay the ultimate price for his senseless act of violence. When asked if he wanted to give a final statement, he'd chosen to remain silent. And despite the fact that he only had moments to live with nothing to lose, he refused to acknowledge his crimes or even apologize for his actions. In February of 2019, which was a decade after McFadden had been executed, his DNA was matched to a cold case that detectives were working on in Portland, Oregon. The details of this incident involve the horrific rape and murder of 20-year-old Anna Marie Hlavka. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Lavek?
Lavaca, maybe. I don't know. She had been discovered deceased in her apartment on July 24th, 1979, with an electrical cord wrapped around her neck. The DNA technology was really still years away at that time, and the
Yeah.
perpetrator managed to elude capture, and the case was filed away to gather dust. It was only when McFadden's samples were entered in the national database that Anna Marie's killer was finally exposed. Intact DNA that was saved from under her fingernails had at last pinpointed her killer, who was a man the police had never suspected. Those left behind to mourn the victims whose lives were cut short by a chance encounter with McFadden wept not only for the tragic loss of their loved ones, but also the futures they would never see. Suzanne, whose murder had finally taken McFadden out of commission for good, had been a member of the Honor Society in high school. Excuse me.
She'd
She
be in
was,
her 50s now.
well, she was a popular cheerleader. She was a great academic. She loved children and planned to pursue a career in the field of education before fate stepped in and took it all away from her. Brian was said to have been down to earth and friendly to everyone, regardless of their social status or level of popularity. He was an all-rounder who was captain of the football team, an avid reader, and who drank in knowledge at every opportunity. Gina, the eldest of the friend group at 20, had been valedictorian of her graduating class. She was a natural born caregiver and studying to be a registered nurse at the time of her death. Anne Marie was engaged to be married when McFadden targeted her. She was called a quiet sort who wouldn't harm a fly, and she always prided herself in staying out of trouble. Unfortunately, trouble found her anyway. For those who knew and loved the innocent souls who had the misfortune of crossing Gerald McFadden's path, nothing could ever make things right. And if there's ever a silver lining that could be found, lies in the knowledge that their killer paid for his crime, making the world a safer place for everyone. Here's the other Stranger Things thing. Cold case detectives are asking anyone who might have lived in Portland during 1979 to come forward if they recognize the photo of McFadden. Detectives would like to learn more about his whereabouts when he was in Portland, and anyone who has information about McFadden should contact Detective Meredith Hopper. Yeah, that's what I said. She can be reached at meredith.hopper@portlandoregon.gov.
If you see something, say something.
And that's the story of Gerald Animal McFadden.
Well, thank you, sir. That was awesome. I would like to say something to our listeners who aren't from Texas, just so you guys understand. I know everybody thinks Texas is saguaro cactuses and desert. Most of it is actually not. When you get east, what do you say? East of Dallas, maybe 20 miles. Does that sound about right?
For
there is a forest basically that starts,
Yes.
yeah, 20
Yes.
miles east of Dallas and goes all the way to basically Florida.
Well, not so not just forest. In the state of Texas, you can find every type of climate.
Yes.
You can find every type of environment.
Yes.
And that's why a lot of places, a lot of movie companies choose to film here is because they can get just about any type of scenery that they need in this state, from
Hmm.
city to desert to forest to snow to, we've got it all. This state is very big
Yes.
and has a lot in it. So
Yes. I am probably closer to Canada than I am to Jeffrey, and we're both still in Texas.
no, I think Canada's a little bit farther away than that.
You sure?
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest example of how big it is closer from LA to El Paso than it is from El Paso to Dallas.
That's right.
So so that gives you a sign there. So anyway, that's my story for this week. I appreciate you taking that journey with me.
Well, thank you, sir. That was
Uh,
awesome.
as always, you can find more information about us on nerderymurder.com. That's our hub where you can find everything we talk about. You'll find not only our episodes, but links of what we talk about, plus pictures from the subjects that we cover. Plus, you can find the link to our YouTube page, which Zig so often updates.
Yes, there are little bits and things from lower decks, so you guys can go out and see that sort of thing this week. Uh, it's quite lovely and a lot of fun.
Awesome. You can also find the link to our merchandise page, or if you wish to show off your nerdery and nerdy fandom, please do consider going there. You can get various things from your shirts to stickers for your car to, other things that are on there. So go out there and show off your fandom. You can also find the link to our Patreon, where if you wish to become a patron and help donate to the show, that along with our merchandise does help with the cost of our show. It does help cost to keep us on the air and keep things going. So do consider that. We appreciate each and every one of you.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. Last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the subject matters we discuss. So with that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
and I'm Jeffrey with your murdery.
Cue the music.